All right. Well, first of all, welcome to all of you. And those of you who've been coming to some of the webinars know that normally there is Africa, usually here, and she's kind of the moderator, but today she wasn't able to make it. So I am taking over for this
Yes.
piece to just welcome all of you to the CAAASA UCLA CCEE Advancing Equity in an Era of Crisis webinar series. The CAAASA, which is the California Association of African American Superintendent and Administrators, and the University of California, Los Angeles Center for the Transformation of Schools, put the project together with this generous support from the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence. And we really appreciate their support and their partnership. At the very end, we are going to be putting in a link to a survey, and Lybroan and I really appreciate the feedback that you can give us. We comb through it, look for patterns, so please take time to fill the survey. I think the only thing that we wanted to mention too is that when you are putting something in the chat, make sure that you're putting it out to the panelists and attendees, because a lot of you have lots of thoughtful resources and comments and insights, and we want to make sure everybody is hearing them. So please do that. I think that's all when we get started. There is going to be an Ask the Experts, or there is an Ask the Experts portal, which will allow you to ask a question. So there's a link to that that you'll be able to, if we don't have time, since we only have an hour. So at this point, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Watkins. My background is high school English and social studies, and I'm a teacher and right now a consultant around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Lybroan, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, thank you, Ann. Hello, everyone. My name is Lybroan James. I am an educational consultant with a company called STEMulate Learning. We put the M in STEM. And I was a classroom teacher for 15 years teaching high school mathematics. And I've also been an online teacher actually since 2001. And so we're excited to be here with you, and we're going to go ahead and get this party started, Ann.
All right. So the topic today is culturally responsive teaching. And I just wanted to let you know our outcomes, that we're really going to take a close look at what it means. What is culturally responsive teaching? What it looks like in the classroom, including virtual ones, because we know that's going to be, at least in the foreseeable future, part of our role as teachers. And also thinking about how we build a strong community and explicitly name and honor the assets that students bring to our classrooms, rather than focusing on the deficits, which is what seems to be the norm oftentimes. How we can help our students recognize their assets, support them in identifying their own challenges. And this is one way we can support our students in becoming lifelong learners. So that's where we're going today. The next slide is for you. And we always, at the beginning of our webinars, we want to clarify when we introduce terms. And I know a lot of people have heard the term culturally responsive teaching. And I want you to think just for a minute how you might define it, or what are some characteristics? What might it look like in the classroom? What are the characteristics of culturally responsive teaching? And as you have some ideas, please we welcome you to either raise your hand and share it, or add it to our chat box.
Yeah, we'd be more than happy to take a couple of people who, if they want to share out verbally about your definition of culturally responsive teaching. Oh, I see one right here.
Right.
All righty.
You.
All righty, Heather, go ahead and unmute yourself and share, please.
Hi, you guys. How are you today?
Good.
Great to have you.
Good. For me, culturally responsive teaching is honestly knowing who's in my classroom, whether it be their ethnic background, their social background, but how am I relating to them and relating my curriculum and how I'm delivering my curriculum to those kids.
Thank you very much, Heather. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, we have another one here. I'm trying to, I think there's a Duke, there we go. One second there, and there we go. Go ahead, Duke. Go ahead, unmute yourself, Duke.
Yeah, go. Can you hear me, Lybroan?
Yes, go right ahead, Duke. Yeah.
All right, go ahead. Simply involves valuing the background of students and then building upon what they bring to the classroom to be able to allow them access into the curriculum.
Great, great, great. Thank you very much. Well stated, both of you. You know, and it's really adjusting the classroom to meet the needs of the students. I like how you said honoring their voice in their culture at the same time.
And also, I wanted to add one more comment that I saw, a number of great comments in the chat. So you guys keep your eyes on the chat. But Ty saying it's teaching that's rooted in equity, culture, and community. So thank you. Thank you all. Lots of really good characteristics and definitions. So right now we're going to just watch a less than 2-minute quick video, as we tend to do in our webinars that are it's just about culturally responsive teaching.
Yeah.
And as you watch it, just be thinking about the characteristics, how they align with what you're thinking.
Demonstrating how culturally and linguistically responsive teaching looks in the classroom, validation and affirmation of home language and home cultural behaviors through instructional activities for the purposes of building and bridging the students to success in academia and mainstream culture. That really starts with 4 general areas of instruction: classroom management, academic vocabulary, academic literacy, and academic language.
Can you find more than one meaning for each sentence? You guys read.
Nancy fed Tom the big gray cat.
It adds engagement to math because sometimes a subject is not highly favored by the students.
We got to be open to try new things because obviously the ways in which we have worked in the past don't work for all kids.
It's really important to me that we all see each other as a team, because when things get really hard in this class, I want them to be able to know that they can depend on each other. And so CLR for me works really well both with accessibility and with that idea of community building and validation for who they are and where they come from and what they bring to the table.
Now I look at culture in through different eyes. It's made me a better teacher. It's made my students more engaged every day in the classroom. The students just seem like they're getting it better.
And it really gels it for them, and they realize at that point that this belongs to them.
And it helps you to keep that energy you want to have with them.
It's amazing how well they're able to retain.
Using the different strategies and letting the students guide my teaching, that helps me to be able to relate it to them.
All righty, Ann.
All right. So that was just a little taste of how some impressions and characteristics and what the effect of culturally responsive teaching is. And I really like that work that's being done because I think it really helps all teachers become more culturally responsive in their teaching, in their thinking. So the next slide that Lybroan's getting ready to put up and share is
you see that, and
I'm only seeing your desktop, Ron.
Okay, 1 second here.
Okay. It's a pretty desktop.
Oh, thank you. 1 second here.
I like as you're doing that, I like the comment around becoming familiar with all the different cultures present in the classroom and really not making, I think one of the things is we don't want to make assumptions or stereotype, but really getting to know them.
Right. Are you able to see it now, Anne, or no?
No.
Okay, 1 second then.
Okay. There we go.
Oh, now.
There we go. Okay.
Okay. Okay, boom, there we go.
Great. Okay, moving forward a couple. I wanted to just share with you this importance of it's culturally relevant and driven by high standards. So it's not just one or the other. The other thing I think is this notion of differentiation. And a lot of you mentioned it in your chat, in the chat, that making understanding students' individual strengths and needs and differentiating based on that. And there's just so many great resources around differentiation, mainly by Carol Ann Tomlinson's work. And then the other thing I think is really important is this ongoing formative assessment strategies to help us understand what students are bringing, what are the assets and opportunities that they're bringing, and that how that can help us adjust our teaching.
Yeah. And to add to that, I think I agree with you in terms of the importance of the formative assessment strategy. And especially now in the online or remote learning environment, we really have to spend extra time on formative assessments. Teachers, when they're engaging with students online, need to constantly check in for feedback. One way I do this is through polling. I send out polls to ask students how they're doing, or I use a numbering system to ask them how they're doing. Do you understand this concept? Let me know on a scale of 1 to 5. How are you feeling today on a scale of 1 to 10? And so I'm constantly getting feedback and reading in the chat those numbers, and it helps me to adjust my instruction or adjust where I need to direct my focus. So I agree with you, Anne, yes, that formative assessment piece is very important.
Absolutely. And so when we talk a little bit about culturally responsive teaching as far as what we teach or the curriculum, we really have to be thinking specifically in general about what should students know, understand, and be able to do. You know, what is the most important, worthy of understanding content? What questions should we explore? And rather than trying to cover, we should be prioritizing, because everybody knows who's looked at the teaching standards that there's just no way, unless we were here from dawn till dusk, 365 days. So how we prioritize that and how we all together teach these in a way that incorporates and embraces the cultural lives and experiences of our students.
Fantastic. And so now if we look at here at the pedagogy, how we teach, it's really important that we understand the background, knowledge, and culture of the students that are in our classes. One important part of this is taking the time to do a survey in the beginning of the school year, is when I usually like to do it, to ask students, what is your home life like? What is your culture like? What are some of the norms in your family? What are some of the norms when you're having at holidays with your relatives? And so using that to really inform how you teach. Thinking about Zaretta Hammond's book, Cultural Responsive Teaching and the Brain, she says that there's two major cultural archetypes. There's the individualistic culture and the collectivist culture. And really about 20% of cultures are individualistic cultures, and about 80% of the cultures in the world are collectivist cultures. And as a teacher or educator, we need to be aware of what culture we're bringing to the class, And what is the predominant culture? Is it individualistic or collectivist? And one of the struggles and why we need cultural responsive teaching is because the majority of teachers come from individualistic cultural background, where they believe is learning should be done by the individual. Now you see things in education like personalized learning, where they try to put a kid on a computer so they can work at their own pace. That is an individualistic cultural concept. So if that's my culture, then that works for me. But the majority of the students in public school, students of color, come from collectivist cultures. So they need collaboration, they need interaction, they need to talk, they need to work in groups. And so when the teachers in the classroom, if their particular culture doesn't match or jive with the students, then you see a lot of conflict and some of the things we see. So it's really important that we understand the cultural archetype and cultures of the students in the classroom. And really understanding, oh, go ahead, Ann.
No, you go ahead, understanding.
Yeah, and I was just saying, and understanding that the classroom is about those students. It's not about us, the teachers. Our job is how do we take their culture and create bridges to the content that we're trying to teach them so that they have a way to connect.
And I just wanted to add, at one time when I was working with student teachers, I would say, you guys are here deciding to be teachers because you've been able to work you've been effective in a system that aligns with your culture. And it's very, it may be you, what did you say the percentage was? 10 or 20%?
20% is individualistic culture.
So
yes.
There's 80%. So think about those students who are in your room. Those 80% are different than you. And how are you going to understand that?
Exactly. And then really connecting your pedagogy so that it's reflective of the culture of your students, but then making them aware of your culture, because they still need to understand your culture as well. And one of the best ways to do that is to model for students. How do you problem solve? How do you deal with challenges? So you need to model, this is conflict resolution. Or when I meet, when I'm struggling in class, this is how I think. These are things I should do to overcome that so that you can empower your students as much as possible.
And many times we as teachers don't remember to do that. So the other piece, and that's what LeBron spoke about a little bit and we touched on, was this assessment. And I always like to think about it as how do we measure our success as educators, rather than thinking about, oh, these kids just don't get it. What's wrong with these kids? I'm thinking immediately, what's wrong with the way I'm teaching? Or why isn't it, who am I missing? And that's why it's so important, this formative or ongoing assessment. And LeBron mentioned that first bullet, and that's something that is easy to do at the very beginning, and also to, hey, what do you guys, as you do a check-in, hey, what's interesting to you now? What are you thinking? What are your, what do you see as a new thing you've learned, or your strength, or you're excited about? I think that last bullet when I taught was my best feedback. I know all of us as teachers, we get people to come in and observe us, but when I would finish a lesson and ask kids for feedback on what was better, what could I have done better, what was working, that's the real feedback, the most authentic feedback I ever got. And I was really taking it seriously. Plus it's empowering for kids.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And I'm going to reiterate a very important point you made, in that the formative assessment is really about the teacher's performance, not about the student's performance. And coaching teachers in several school districts and observing teachers in many schools, we put the onus on the student. We say the assessment reflects the student's learning, but very, very rarely do we see the teacher taking more ownership in that, okay, I have to adjust my teaching style or my lesson so that these students can be successful on this particular assessment. I think it's really, the challenge is adjusting the pedagogy for teachers to say, I tried it this way. I tried direct instruction and 60% of the kids failed this exam. So direct instruction is not working. Now I have to figure out, how do I change as a teacher? Maybe we have to put them in groups. Maybe I need to have a creative project, a hands-on project, whatever's gonna meet the needs of my students and help them to gain the knowledge and skills that I'm trying to convey.
And maybe I have to shorten my input, my lecture.
Exactly.
Maybe I need to remember
stop talking so damn much.
There you go. Stop talking so damn much. Okay, moving on.
Yes, and so another important part of this is the aspect of power. And so this is what we see often in classrooms, is that the teacher at the front of the board, no, you can't talk. No, you can't breathe. No, you can't smile. It's a control and a power move, and students understand this. And one of the craziest things that teachers don't understand is really students have the power in the classroom. They allow you to put up these rules, and they allow you to teach and hand out assignments. But when you see there is classroom management issues, the management issues typically are about the teacher. So students are constantly giving you feedback. So if they don't pay attention, if they won't be quiet, it's because they're saying the way that you're teaching this particular lesson is not working for me. But students aren't always sophisticated enough to effectively express how they feel, so they act out. And that's the way they express those aspects of power. Now, let's look at these aspects of power a little closer. One, there's issues of power are enacted in the classroom. The teacher has the power. And so by putting up the rules, by telling one kid, okay, I think you're a leader, but then tell another kid, oh, you're disruptive, I'm dismissing you, then what they're doing is sending out power signals as to who I believe is exhibiting correct behavior and who I believe is not. And students pick up on these things. Also, there are rules for participating in the culture of power. And so as we grow up, students understand how to participate in the culture of power. Kids in the classroom know I have a voice, I can speak up. And those are the students who usually raise their hand most often, sit in the front. And then there are other students who realize, you know, this teacher is really not feeling me. I don't feel comfortable. So I'm going to either sit in the back or be quiet and do these things because I don't want to interrupt the power structure in the classroom. And ironically, if you aren't a participant in the culture of power, being told explicitly the rules will help you. So for example, if you have a student who is new to the school, they transfer in from another city or another state or even another country, it is helpful to find someone in the class who can partner with them and say, look, here's how things happen here at this school. This is what the teacher liked. This is what's accepted. This is what is not accepted. Because if you just allow kids to try to figure out on their own, that usually leads to a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication with the teacher, kids getting suspended, expelled. So there's always a power dynamic that's going on. In fact, Lisa Delpit, she gave a great example of that. And so typically in white culture, for white women, when they're trying to discipline their children, they ask them questions. And the question is a directive. So, Bobby, don't you want to clean up your room? Bobby, aren't you ready for dinner? So that is the white cultural way of a mother telling the child what to do. The Black culture, for example, is more directive. Like, Andre, get your butt in here and clean up this room. Andre, you know it's time for dinner. Get in here right now. And so when you get into school, the power dynamic is now the white teacher would say, Andre, don't you want to do your homework? Well, she's thinking that in her cultural mind, Andre should understand what she's saying. Andre's like, you just asked me a question. My mama don't ask me a question. She tell me what to do. So if you ask me a question, now I have an option. So I could be like, no, I don't feel like working right now. And then the white teacher would take that as disrespect and enact that power, send Andre to the principal's office, and we know how the story goes from there.
And one of the comments, LeBron, was in the chat, isn't that stereotyping? And do you want to speak to that?
Right. Yeah, and so understanding cultures, there are cultural norms and behaviors. And so those are examples. But of course, on the continuum, there are white people who grew up maybe say in the South, whose cultural experience mirrors that of the Black experience, or vice versa, or people who grew up in the Black community whose experience is similar. But in general, in generalities, that's where the conflict comes in the difference of cultures. And the Black child who would understand that the teacher asking the question was actually a demand, that means because they've already studied the culture of power. So I'm saying the average student has not studied the culture of power, and they don't know how to code switch in the moment to understand. And so, but that's a very good question about the stereotyping. And then the last bullet here is those who have the power rarely understand that it exists. They think it doesn't exist. The power dynamics don't. But those who have less power, they see the power dynamics all the time. So then that's another potential area of conflict. It's the people who have power, like, there's no power struggle. Everyone in the class is equal. Well, no, they're not all equal, because when you have the power, you're not aware of the conflict. But those who have less power, they are constantly keen of what's happening.
And I just want to add in one other thing before you flip to this next slide around that. And I think that it kind of gets back to Glenn Singleton's agreements. And part of it is, as a white teacher, or even as a teacher of color, when you're in the classroom, it's important to be really explicit about these rules, issues of power and who has power, because if you have to make sure, I mean, you have to say, hey, in the white world, this is how it works. And the white world is the power world right now. And not saying that it's a good or a bad, but it's the reality. And having those honest conversations, I feel like that really builds trust. I know it builds trust when I've had those conversations with kids, because they're like, she's speaking her truth and helping us to understand it. So just something I thought about.
Thank you. And speaking that truth is so important.
Yeah, so we're going to share with you another couple of quotes that come from Lisa Delpit in her Silence Dialogue, The Power and Pedagogy of Educating Other People's Children. And this one is from a parent, a demand of a parent. My kids know how to be Black. You all teach them how to be successful in the white man's world. And the next quote, we had fun in her class, but she was mean. I remember she used to say, tell me what's in the story, Wayne. She pushed. She used to get on me. She pushed me to know. She made us learn. We had to get in the books. There was this tall guy and he tried to take her on, but she was in charge of that class and she did not let anyone run her. So these are quite interesting and thought-provoking quotes. And we'd like to give people, anybody who'd be willing to share, either raise your hand or add to the chat, a chance to respond. Your feelings that they may have brought up for you, do they offer a different perspective, or are they aligned with yours, or any other comments you might have? So we're going to take a minute and give you an opportunity to give us some thoughts.
Okay, Ramsey, go ahead and feel free to share and unmute. Go ahead, Ramsey.
Oh, okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So as I was listening to what you all were sharing, one of the things I was thinking about is the feelings that come up for me when I hear some of those statements, really as a reflection of whether the system that we're operating in and those who are in charge of it, meaning decision makers, are aware of the ways in which power is being reflected both at their level and all the way down to what arrives on a child's desk. And so the feeling that comes for me is a question more about what are the ways in which we're willing to sacrifice to move to what I believe is this new era where we're allowing student voice, community voice, those who have been historically marginalized, to lead and be in positions of making decisions, even our students, and we allowing ourselves to sort of be comfortable with that, with all the messiness that potentially might come with it.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely. So true.
Yeah, I'm going to take Dana, if you could please unmute your mic and share.
Mute. Thank you. I enjoyed listening to that, and I thought it was very powerful what she read, because it showed, I believe it shows students that as educators, we see them. And as an educator, I teach English and history. I pretty much I'd like to be a teacher or more observant to each and every student, meaning that you push those who have the ability, but maybe a little reluctant. So that piece that she read to me just shows the students that I see you. I'm not gonna quit on you. I'm not gonna allow you to quit on yourself. And I am gonna push you to be great, whatever that great is for you, equitably. And that's it.
Thank you so much.
Powerful. Thank you.
Yes. One second, we're gonna take one more. Just 1 second here. Now we're gonna get RM Villanueva to please share. RM Villanueva, if you could unmute your mic and please share.
You're still muted.
Okay, we'll come back. We'll come back then. And so one thing I wanted to share also, Anne.
Yes.
I'm going to go back to this quote here. This one: my kids know how to be Black. Y'all need to teach them how to be successful in the white man's world. And so even though I did well in school and college and everything, my parents explicitly told me how to deal with white people all the time. That was the one lesson I would get daily at school. This is how you deal with white people. This would make white people mad. This is how you get on their good side. Here's how you have to be careful. And as a kid, I couldn't understand, like, why are my parents telling me how to deal with white people all the time? Like, they would make me study white people and their behaviors and mannerisms. And I didn't know how valuable that would be growing up. And so then it taught me how to code switch, so that when I'm in the hood hanging with the fellas and my friends, I talk one way, and then as soon as I'd be in an academic environment or at work, I'd switch. And it became like a natural instinct of how I switched, but it helped me to navigate the system, because one wrong move, I said the wrong thing, I would have got a referral sent out, and then that could have sent me on a whole nother path. So students of color are always walking on this tight wire, always trying to, how do I advocate for myself, but how do I not make the teacher angry? And how do I maintain my culture, but then speak in a way where white people will respect who I am? And so it's this crazy dynamic that continues to happen. So I just want to share that, Anne.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that. I think that's a really, really important thing. And there's just some amazing thoughts and insights in the chat. So I want to encourage people to look at those as we go along. So we're going to talk now a little bit about what it means, assets-based teaching. And Lybroan, you want to take that?
Yeah, and so I think this is one of the most important aspects for teachers to understand. I think teachers, all of us, for some reason, we look at our students from a deficit model. What are they missing? So when I go into schools, I'm saying, well, tell me about your classroom. What's happening? They say, well, most of my kids are 2 years behind in math, or they're 3 years behind in English. So they start off with the deficit and never saying what the assets those students are bringing. And so I think it's really a mind shift, which is why we put the half empty or half full cups, and so teachers should always come in looking at the cup being half full, not half empty, and valuing what is the kid bringing. So if a kid comes from say a tough neighborhood or difficult neighborhood or a tough family situation, the fact that they make it to school every day means that they have some very great qualities. Obviously, they're able to negotiate, they're able to solve problems at a high level, to figure out how to get home, how to get to school, how to find time to do homework, whether or not they have challenging situations at home. And so it's really always acknowledging students for what they bring to the class, and also acknowledging their history and cultural and strengths. And a lot of times that is difficult for students. I know for myself as a mathematician, through my whole time in college, I never saw any Black mathematicians or Latino mathematicians. And so I'm like, did anybody Black ever do math? So then it wasn't until after college that I realized that the first mathematician on earth was an African named Imhotep in Egypt. It's the father of mathematics. I never learned that. And that would have had a huge impact on my self-esteem. And so really acknowledging a student's cultural background is the self-esteem they're going to need in order to succeed when they hit the rough patch. And so we really have to look at what they bring, and then also what does their culture bring. And then the last thing we want to do is ask ourselves, if I'm looking at the deficits of my students, you really have, as an educator, have to ask yourself why. Because if you have a child, do you look at your child and think about your child's deficits when you think about your child? Or do you think about the assets that they bring?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that this slide here is important, because I think LeBron's last question is why, is partially answered by testing, looking at, statistics that show, low reading scores, low math scores, so it sort of informs us all into that deficit way of thinking as educators. And I think we have to consciously work to discover students' assets. I think having intentional conversations with them, this is one thing that Lisa Delfit's book talked about, specific conversations with them and their families about, what are you good at? What are you interested in? Where do you see your strengths? And oftentimes that's the first time a parent has ever heard an educator ask that question. You have to be really authentic about wanting to learn it and helping the students to understand that they actually do have strengths. Because like LeBron said, throughout his career, even all the way up and through college, he didn't have that culturally relevant content that helped him to understand the history of Black folk in math. I just want to also share the assets notion and a strategy. I work as a consultant with a small alternative school of at-risk kids, and they have restorative circles for their staff. Theirs is a restorative practice, and they decided they wanted to sort of, as a whole staff, focus on a couple of students that they were really struggling with. And they were going to hand around a little worksheet that started out with talking about students presenting issues and behaviors, and looking at the causes, et cetera, and how we can support them. And I just simply suggested, why don't we have a column that begins with students' strengths and their growing edges? And just changing the terms really made a really profound shift in the mindset of that group. And as they went around the circle and talked about this young man, Alfredo, they started to think about some of the things he brought that were positive, that he was self-aware, he had ownership of some of the challenges he was facing and the ways he was disrupting, that he was willing to change, he was open to counseling. He understood that when there were rules that he was asked to follow and didn't make any sense in the school, that they were, he had trouble with those. And so as the conversation went around, the whole tone shifted into, what are some of the things that he does bring that we can use to build on? And I can go on with it, but it was really a very positive way. And they decided this was really helpful as a way to think about students together, and everybody bringing pieces of pictures of Alfredo and all of the students together. And I know it was a small school context, but I do believe that it's just shifting to when you're talking about kids, what are they bringing? What are the strengths? Where are the growing edges that they have? What are some of the things that we know about that student? The other thing I want to share just really quickly before we move on is that school started a student council, and it was, these are all kids who've been thrown out of other schools, have had many other problems with the law, etc. And there were some people kind of dubious about student council, and this brought all of the personal assets by empowering these student voices and actions that the teachers hadn't even considered. Wow, I didn't know these kids were so powerful, working together, presenting to the staff what they should be allowed to wear on Fridays, etc. And so I just feel as if there are so many ways that we need to shift the whole way of mindset of thinking about kids into a more positive way.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that story, Anne.
Sure. And I'd like now for you to just a chance for a couple voices or a couple of posts in our chat about some strategies you've observed in the school context, and even particularly during this time when we're moving more towards virtual teaching and learning, that demonstrates the value of an assets-based mindset, the power of it. Any hands up?
Yeah, I'm
Anybody
looking for
got
the hands up. If anyone has would like to share, please raise your hand. Or like Ann said, if you want to add the comment to the chat, that would be great. And we really appreciate all the fantastic comments that you're sharing in the chat and the resources. Those are phenomenal.
Yes. I wonder if Molly, who put a thing about linguistically and culturally diverse students, is willing to share some of her thoughts.
If you're willing to share, Molly, just go ahead and hit the button and to raise your hand, and we'll give you access to share. All right, here we go.
Yay! Hi, Molly.
All right, go right ahead, Molly.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to share a little bit. I actually just wrote my master's about a year ago on asset-based teaching in 21st century learning environments. And so I learned a lot actually about myself as a teacher. I always taught Title I students and had thought I was doing the right thing, which I was for the most part, but I learned so much more with the culturally inclusive and linguistic methods that I think all of our teachers need now. So anyway, other than the soapbox, I have observed what I really focused on as a teacher and also in my master's was that heterogeneous grouping is really important. It really helps to enhance the asset-based mindset because all the students have assets in that group and they help each other, learn from each other. And so as a mostly fourth grade teacher and also teacher coach, heterogeneous grouping was really big for me. And it also allows for interdisciplinary learning so that students are learning multiple subjects with project-based learning. And basically that has always been a big part of the success that I saw. And the best strategy that I have was heterogeneous grouping, project-based learning, and helping the students really celebrate all of their assets.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Molly. Anybody else want to say something before we move forward?
Yeah, we have one more here. Gerald Luke is gonna.
Great,
share.
thank you, Gerald.
Go ahead, Gerald.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm not in the classroom anymore. I'm district administrator, but one thing I noticed in our district, and we probably moved back to, but the work of Dr. Shiraki Holly, looking at a lot of the strategies and just looking at the validating and affirming what's happening in the classroom, what the students bring to the classroom, I should say, is very important. And doing that in a way that that helps us get away from the deficit model and understanding that our students bring some very positive skills to the classroom, and we have to acknowledge them and actually be very deliberate in acknowledging them, because some of those same skills, being if we really look at how we tend to gravitate toward the deficit model, we look at those skills that they bring to the table as crutches or actually just issues that cause problems in the classroom. But when we flip our perspective on them and look at how we can validate them, we can affirm what they bring to the table, and then also build bridges to make sure that what's happening in the classroom, the standard English, the curriculum, pedagogy that we're using really celebrates them. And that helps their mindset as well as a teacher's mindset to make sure that they're getting what they need in an environment that they feel that they are wanted in. And that's a big piece, making sure the students feel that they're wanted inside the classroom.
Thank you. It's so true. Both Lybroan and I are familiar with Shiraki Hawley's work, so
yes, most definitely.
Yeah, kudos to his work. It's phenomenal. I had a chance to visit his school back in the day. He's an amazing educator, so powerful. Yeah. So moving forward, we're going to talk just a little bit about this whole child concept. And before we move forward, Lybroan, I just want to say, as I was kind of glancing down the chat, there are some incredible questions that I feel like we need a whole nother time just
we
those
do, I
of
know.
us to come together and talk and learn from one another, because there's just yeah. So anyway, I could. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, so this frame here I wanted to share as a framework for everyone. It was the framework that I learned as a student at Harvard, in the graduate school of education, and it blew my mind because as an educator, I always focus on the brain, what the kids know, what skills, what knowledge. But I remember my first week at Harvard, they said you have to work above the neck in terms of the brain and below the neck in terms of heart and emotions. And so as educators, to educate the whole child, just be mindful, like, is this lesson working above the neck or below the neck? And if I'm above the neck too much, how can I start working below the neck? How can I work on relationships with students? How can I work on showing care? How can I meet the social emotional needs of students? How can I take their temperature? And I mean, I'm surprised now that my kids who are in the 10th grade, 9th grade, in 12th grade, their school is giving them final exams. I'm like, how can you give kids final exams during a pandemic? It's because you're above the neck and you're not understanding what's happening below the neck. The kids are dealing with trauma, being sheltered in. So the stress that finals offers is going to be multiplied now. How do I do a final during the pandemic at home? And so I just want educators to be more mindful of, when you're thinking about the whole child, thinking about working above the neck and below the neck to support students.
And then also looking at the next slide, how could you do a final that would incorporate the heart and the head, so that you're not ignoring the fact that there are these traumas, serious traumas that are happening for kids right now, and you're still remembering that in the long run, we've got to stay focused on the academics as well. And I think that's a big challenge for all of us right now, social emotional learning and academics, whether it's either or. And I read some articles before this coming together around ways that it has to be integrated into our pedagogy and content. Starting simply with a check-in and check-out at the beginning and end of the day.
Exactly. And another thing too, in terms of the social emotional learning and the academics, is to maintain a growth mindset. And so that's also looking at the assets that students bring and their capabilities. So from Carolyn Dweck's work on mindset, one powerful word to use with students is the word yet, because that opens up all the possibilities. You may not be able to add fractions yet. You may not be able to write a 5-paragraph essay yet. And so by using that word yet, it reminds the teacher that this kid is still on the continuum of development. And it makes the students feel supported in an emotional way, understanding that, wow, I still have time. I can try again. There's still room for improvement. So that word yet is important.
And the notion of encouraging creativity is so critical, I think, in terms of integrating social emotional learning into academics, that there are many ways to demonstrate understanding, skills, knowledge, content. I think that there are many students that we just assume because they haven't learned the effective writing or reading way or speaking way of sharing what they know, that they don't know. But yet you start looking at plays that kids write, poetry that they've written, stories, dance, music, art, how those demonstrate their understanding, and not only that, their skill of, around the content. One of the things that I always, when I think about these, was making it really clear to the kids, these were the outcomes. This is what I'm hoping you'll be able to demonstrate knowledge or understanding of, or the skills of, before, as you put this out, as you put out the opportunity for them to demonstrate their understanding in creative ways.
Thank you so much, Ann.
Mm-hmm.
And so now as we, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we're going now to be thinking a little forward. This was something that LeBron and I thought about, and I wanted to give LeBron a chance to begin to have us think about this.
Yeah, so as we begin to wrap up our session today, we want to start thinking, what can be post-pandemic? We all know school will never be the same, completely the same as it was before. There will be some kind of new dynamic. There will be a different new ways in which we'll engage students. There more than likely will be an online component, whether it's blended learning or offering certain classes online, but it will never be the same. And so we want everyone to think of, on this continuum, what will the future of education look like? Will it be a nationalized education system where we'll have standards for the entire country? I know we've tried this through the Common Core and NGSS, and we've learned a lot of lessons in the last 10 years, especially with the Common Core, in terms of unrolling standards, but then providing adequate training and opportunities for teachers for it to be even more successful. On the flip side, could it be that we totally decentralize schools, and that that students are given vouchers so that they can take classes in different places? One model I've seen is that in the future, students in middle school and high school will be able to choose the teachers they want from a list of thousands of teachers all over the country. And so imagine this, that every student gets to choose the teacher that they want. That would change the education system and flip it on its head. Because now if I'm a student, I want a teacher who has high content knowledge, who's engaging, who understands my culture. And if I watch a YouTube clip of that teacher and read their background, I can say, hey, that's the kind of teacher I want to teach me English. But then I want this other teacher from Chicago to teach me history. Then I want this other teacher from Mississippi to teach me math. And then this other teacher from New York to teach me. So now we don't limit kids to the city that they're in. So that's just one possibility of what education can look like post-pandemically. And the interesting thing is, we say there's not enough teachers of color, or there's not enough teachers who are effective in teaching students of color. Because having teachers of color is one thing, being able to effectively teach a student of color is totally different. And what we want are people of any background who can effectively teach students of color to provide equity. And this online learning may provide an avenue for that.
What we'd like to do is, in these last few minutes, is to get your thoughts about the future. And I think all of us, I feel like all of us, everybody who's here, all of our different perspectives is an amazing way to be thinking outside of not only the box, but outside of everything that we've set up, all of the systems, all of the things that have sort of held back kids. And so let's just, LeBron, see if you can have some people share some thoughts.
Exactly. If anyone has any thoughts about, what the future may look like, short term or even long term, or just to share your thoughts on that, please raise your hand. We'd like to get at least 2 or 3 people to share for about 15 to 30 seconds before we wrap up. All right, I see one person here. All right. Go right ahead, Duke. Unmute yourself, please. And go ahead and share, Duke.
Yeah, I see a situation where some of the learning will be online and the others will be in class, the other will be in classroom. I don't see all of it just on one platform. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, definitely it will be some form of blended instruction. And the question is, we as educators have to be creative and forward thinking as to what will this new learning look like. And now we have this juncture of change. And so now's the time where we can implement these changes and redesign education to make it fit all students and not just a few.
And I think that teachers are ready. I think that teachers have to be open to change, like the Darwin quote about adapting to change is the only way that you're going to survive. And I also think teachers are ready to learn that it doesn't all have to be, in fact, I've seen some changes already. It doesn't have to be every kid sitting there staring at Zoom for the entire day.
Right, exactly.
And there are so many ways that we can have small groups. We can have kids do FaceTime with one another as they're working together on a project. There's just an infinite number, I think, of possibilities that could just make education be so much more meaningful. I just am so hopeful that this is a good time for everybody.
Yeah,
so.
we have great, and we have one more person who wants to share also. Ramsey, if you can go ahead and unmute and share, please.
So I really quick, I wanted to share that I appreciate what you all are sharing. And I know that this is specifically about what can happen through a CRT lens within the classroom. But one of the things I wanted to offer is that culturally responsive teaching or culturally sustaining pedagogy, one of the other ways that we might think about this is, what does this look like beyond the classroom? Because we know that there are systems in place that perpetuate and push these sort of dynamics into the classroom, and thus the sort of inequitable outcomes that our students of color or our CLD students experience. So I just wanted to just add to the conversation that the kinds of things that we're hearing here that should be happening in the classrooms, there are ways in which teachers can advocate north of them, meaning to the decision makers that are more impactful on the system beyond what's happening in their individual classroom. And I think that might be an important perspective to take also.
I appreciate that. And I also want to say that the other part is outside the school, the communities, the power of the parents, the power of people to impact their school and make their school be one, whether it be virtual or whether it be a schoolhouse, be one that is in service of their kids and their families and their communities. So we want to, I guess we're closing down now. I think that hopefully, thank you all so much for being part of this and your thoughts. And I encourage everybody to look at the chat. It's just so powerful. And also let's ask that you spend some time giving feedback. And is that link now in the chat box? I think hopefully that, somebody, there it is. There it is. Al put it in.
Okay.
Thank you, Al.
There you go. Okay.
So you guys, please give us feedback. We so appreciate having this opportunity. Lybroan is doing one more next week, and we hope you all tune in. It's going to be fantastic. Lybroan, say something.
Yes. So yes, thank you everyone for participating. And I've really enjoyed doing these with you and learning along with the participants. It's been a phenomenal experience. And I will be doing one on how to teach math through an ethnomathematics lens for online learning next week. So for all you fellow math nerds out there, math teachers, if you want some ideas on how to engage students in math online, I'll be running a session on that next week. And I want to thank everyone once again for your participation. And please share this information with your colleagues. Share your thoughts, be brave, be bold, and remember it's all about the students. You know, as long as we remember the students come first, that gives us the strength to leave our comfort zone or to speak up for equity when we remember it's about the kids and it's not about us.
Absolutely. Thanks, LeBron.
All righty.
It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Have
you
a great
guys.
day.
Take care.